for having people trickle in slowly.
Hey, Robert, Francisco, I think Tina needs to be moved to attendees. Tina Lee from CPC.
Oh, yes, thank you for that. Thank you, Tina, for joining us.
Thank you, Tina. All right, thanks, guys. Okay.
And the only other CPC staff that will be a panelist when she joins would be Yella.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody else is just going to be attendee.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Well, everybody's so early. Okay, this is good. All right.
I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera while we're waiting for our attendees to trickle in. I assume they're being checked in and everything appropriately.
Oh, Jordan Comcast.
And Robert, are you going to start going ahead and doing the sound check? It looks like Zeb has his hand raised.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, and this is just a reminder to all attendees joining. If you are a listen-only attendee, meaning you don't plan to participate in the discussion, you do not need to raise your hand. Raising your hand is just basically to let IT assist you with testing your audio. So anyone that does plan on participating in the discussion or potentially, please raise your hand and we will call on, IT will call on you one at a time. Thank you.
Hello, Zeb. I've unmuted you. Go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Hi, my name is Zeb Zankel from the law firm Jenner and Block, and I'm here today representing Charter FiberLink CACCO LLC, Time Warner Cable Information Services Communications California LLC, and Bright House Networks Information Services California LLC.
Great, thank you, Zeb. IT, let's go ahead and let's go down the list one at a time. We just want to, identify each participant that has a hand raised, give them opportunity just to test their audio and state their full name and the company or organization they're representing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, Alexandra Green. I've unmuted you. Go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Oh, hi, this is Alexandra Green. I'm here on behalf of the Utility Reform Network, or TURN.
Thank you for that. Hello, Glenn Richards. You've been requested to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Hey, it's Glenn Richards with Dickinson Wright on behalf of the Voice on the Net Coalition. Thank you.
Hello, it's Phil Howard. You've been unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Hello, yeah, Itzel Hayward making an appearance on behalf of Small Business Utility Advocates, or SBUA. Thank you very much.
Hello, QC View. You've been requested to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question or comment. Looks like we lost. Go ahead and raise your hand again, QC View. Patrick Rosfeld, we've unmuted you. Go ahead and, or requested to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question or comment.
I'm representing the Small group. I don't expect to have comments, but so I'm not sure if I need to be a panelist or not, but I'm here to monitor for the Small X.
Hello, Glenn Richards. We've requested for you to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question or comment.
We've already commented. I've already introduced myself.
Oh,
earlier.
sorry. Let's lower your hand. Leo.
This is Leo Fitzpatrick, a telecommunications policy analyst with the Utility Reform Network. No questions or comments at this point. Thank you.
Suzanne Toller, go ahead and you've been requested to unmute.
or would let me unmute. Suzanne Toller here today on behalf of Comcast Phone of California, LLC. Thank you.
Patrick Roosevelt, you have your hand raised again. Did you have a comment or question? No.
I don't. I put my hand down, but my colleague QC Vu is trying to, I think, identify herself, so you may need to unmute her again. Just thought I'd point that out.
Okay, thank you. QC View, you've been unmuted. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, this is QC Vu appearing on behalf of Consolidated Communications of California and Consolidated Communications Enterprise Services.
Thank you for that. Mark Anusi, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Guy Newsy. I'm the president of Telnet Worldwide, and I'm also here on behalf of the Cloud Communication Alliance. Thank you.
Jonathan Marashilian, go ahead and introduce yourself. Jonathan, you've been unmuted or requested to unmute. Go ahead and introduce yourself. David Disher, you've been requested to unmute. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
David Disher representing AT&T today.
Thank you. Jonathan, you've been requested to unmute. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, there, we finally have it working. This is Jonathan Marashlian with the law firm Marashlian and Donahue here on behalf of the Cloud Communications Alliance.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Francisco. This is just a reminder to everyone, anyone that plans to participate as a listen-only attendee, you do not need to raise your hand, but anyone that plans to participate in the discussion, please raise your hand if you have not already done so for IT to do a sound check. Thank you.
Hi, it's Suzanne Toller again. I'm reading your instructions on the PowerPoint, and it does say that if you're going to participate, you need to have your video on. And I apologize if this is obvious to everyone else, but I'm not seeing a video option.
Thank you, Suzanne. You don't have to have the video on. That's optional. If you would like to have the video on, IT, is that feature enabled for the participants?
They don't have to be a panelist to turn on
Okay.
your video.
So we will not have video then for the attendees. Now we do, when we start the roundtable discussion, if any of the participants want to share a visual, then we would elevate them to a panelist. And at that point, we could turn on the video for you.
Thank you, Sky, for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne.
Mhm.
Francisco, oh, there's John. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, John Gutierrez has a hand up.
I just wanted to see if you guys could hear me. I'm not planning to present, but I just wanted to know that you could hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Robert Munoz, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
You guys can hear okay?
Yes, we can.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. This is Penny from the CPUC. If anybody is planning on discussing any of the questions today and would like to share their screen with any diagrams, can you please let us know? Can you please raise your hand now to let us know so that way we may have a list for IT to be able to grant you access to do that. Oops.
This is just a reminder for any new attendees that have joined the meeting. If you plan on participating in the discussion, please raise your hand for IT to test your audio if you have not already done so. Thank you. For any call-in users that plan to participate in the discussion, you can press *3 on your phone to raise your hand for IT to test your audio. If you do not plan to participate in the discussion and are just listening in, you do not need to raise your hand. Thank you.
Oops. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our VoIP Rulemaking R 2208-008 Technical Workshop. The Commission is hosting this public event to further discuss definitions of facilities of interconnected voice over Internet Protocol VoIP service providers. The assigned commissioner is Commissioner John Reynolds, and the assigned administrative law judge is ALJ Camille Watsaga. Today's workshop is scheduled from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I am Penny Lagakis of the CPUC's Communications Division. I am your host for today. At this time, please allow me to go through some useful information to get us through this event. The format of today's workshop is a roundtable discussion in which participants will be asked to respond to 3 questions or topics. I will introduce each question or topic. Participants are asked to use the raise hand feature in WebEx if they would like to provide a response to a question. The raise hand feature is located near the bottom of the WebEx window. There is an image of a hand followed by the word raise. Call-in participants may press *3 on their phone to raise or lower their hand. For participants who are providing a response, if you would like to share anything, please indicate so, and you will be granted the ability to share your screen. Communications Division staff will call on participants to address each item one at a time. When answering, please first state your name and who you represent. Discussion will be limited to approximately 35 minutes per roundtable question or topic, so we may not be able to call on everyone that has their hand raised to address the question or topic being discussed during that round. Johnny Tran of the Communications Division staff will be providing time warnings. Some of the topics discussed at today's workshop may cover issues related to Commission proceedings other than this proceeding R 2208-008. Please refrain from discussing any Commission proceeding other than this proceeding during this workshop. Today's workshop will be recorded and posted on the CPUC's website. After the workshop, at a later date, Administrative Law Judge Camille Watsaga will issue a ruling seeking formal comment on post-workshop questions. Interested parties who do not already have party status wishing to enter comments in the record of the proceeding should also file a motion for party status. Separately, members of the public may also submit public comments via the proceeding docket card R 2208-008. Public comments received online are available to the CPUC's commissioners and the administrative law judge assigned to the case and can help the CPUC make an informed decision. Let's begin today's workshop. Item 1. In its comments submitted on March 9, 2023, Cloud Communications Alliance, CCA, submitted diagrams of various interconnected VoIP offerings. Using either these diagrams or others, identify what facilities interconnected VoIP service providers own, control, operate, or manage in connection with or to facilitate the provision of interconnected VoIP service. Identify each and every facility available at each segment of the diagram. If there are none, indicate so. Sky Bennett of the Communications Division will now begin calling on participants.
Thank you, Penny. And Robert, can you go ahead and advance to the 3rd slide that has the topic discussion item 1?
Francisco, can you please advance the slides?
Give me one sec.
And Francisco, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Great, thank you. So just bear with me a moment here to check who has their hand raised. So it looks like no one has their hand raised. Again, anyone that would like to provide any input on this item, please raise your hand. Okay, it still looks like we don't have any hands raised. So I'm going to go ahead and just go down the list here just to verify. Jonathan with Cloud Communications, do you have anything to add to this discussion item 1?
Or anybody have anything in general to add in terms of just general facilities, interconnected VoIP service providers own, control, operate, or manage in connection with the facilitation of provision of VoIP?
Hi, Penny. This is Jonathan Marashlian. I've been unmuted. Yes, the first comment that I would make is that the diagrams submitted were all by member companies of the Cloud Communications Alliance. We have one member company represented in the workshop, Mark Iannuzzi from Telnet. He may raise his hand and offer to speak on some of the discussion items. The one comment that I would make about the submission is that the diagrams are representative of equipment, not necessarily facilities. And I want to make sure that that is a clear distinction. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And are there any other participants that would like to add anything to discussion item 1?
I see Suzanne Toller. Suzanne, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Penny. I do. Suzanne Toller on behalf of Comcast today. I wanted to say that the diagrams that the cloud folks provided were helpful, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're necessarily perfectly representative of a cable VoIP network. But I did want to sort of start by saying I think that it's important to level set about the differences between various networks sort of shown in the diagrams provided by cloud and the network, at least that Comcast's interconnected VoIP Comcast's interconnected VoIP service is provided. For a cable provider like Comcast, right, voice is a service that we offer over the broadband network. In fact, the definition of VoIP in the Public Utilities Code section is a service that travels over a broadband network. And over that network, right, voice packets go along with data packets and video packets, and that makes up our internet and voice and video service offerings. So that's just kind of the way that it is. Voice, rather than sort of there being, I know this wasn't particularly the question asked here, but rather than there being telecommunications facilities or non-telecommunications facilities, in this particular case, right, everything is over cable facilities. And you know, going to your sort of ultimate question, or the judge's ultimate question here, as a result of that, you know, we believe that Comcast doesn't need any additional facilities-based authority from the commission to provide its VoIP services because we already have that authority basically from our DIFCA franchise, right, which authorizes us to build the cable network. So I just wanted to offer those introductory comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. Earlier, Mr. Marshalian had indicated that that on the cloud's diagrams that were submitted by its members or its member that it was that there was equipment associated and not facilities. I'm not sure if he is still on the line, but if he can clarify what the difference from cloud's perspective is between facilities and equipment, or if there's anybody else from cloud communications that's in today's webinar that can clarify.
I see that Jonathan and Mark both have their hands raised. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. This again is Jonathan Marashlian. Again, just to clarify our position, facilities, as we understand them and as we would posit to the commission, should only include the types of facilities that are in the ground, in the air, strung on poles, basically the last mile connectivity to the customer premise. Everything else that is part of a VoIP network, again, as the previous speaker pointed out, there is no uniformity in how networks are constructed. It's one of the beautiful things about voice over IP and IP technology in general. But the equipment utilized varies depending on company network topology, et cetera. And so, again, for purposes of how the CPUC defines a facility, the position of the Cloud Communications Alliance is pretty simple. It's the last mile. And to the extent a voice over IP company does not own or control the last mile facility, it has no facility in California that would be potentially subject to supplemental licensing requirements or regulatory requirements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Mark, go ahead.
Yes, this is Mark Iannuzzi, president of Telnet and with the CCA. The diagrams that are presented were intended to be logical diagrams. They're not specific network diagrams, but they show the typical components that you might find in a VoIP service provider network. The animating condition has been echoed by these previous speakers, is that this runs over a broadband network, and that's the enabling aspect to all this, is competent VoIP, competent broadband networks. And to Jonathan's comments here, I just want to echo that as well. From a facilities basis here, it's really incumbent upon the last mile for all this to take shape, and that's where we would believe the proper definition rests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And Penny, it doesn't look like there's any more hands raised. Did you have any additional questions you wanted to ask?
Thank you, Sky. Let's see. One moment. Yes, I just had one follow-up kind of question. I mean, if and Cloud or anyone else can kind of go into a little bit more detail about what facilities are in the last mile. I know that it was mentioned, you know, things are in the ground, strung through poles, etc. But if Cloud can go into kind of a little bit more of an additional discussion on that. Or anybody else.
And I see Jonathan has his hand raised. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Again, Jonathan Marashley. As Mark Iannuzzi addressed, Cloud Communications Alliance member companies are all over the top service providers, meaning they do not have ownership or control over the last mile facility. And when I refer to last mile facility, we are talking about the broadband connection to the customer prem. And again, for CCA members, they are universally over the top. They don't own or control. And so I really am not in a position to speak to the nature of those facilities other than to reference them as last mile broadband network connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I don't believe anybody else has their hand raised. Thank you everyone for providing your responses. This concludes our discussion of item 1. We will now continue to item 2. Oh wait, one moment.
We do have one hand raised. Leo, go ahead and speak.
Hi, this is Leo with the Utility Reform Network. I suppose I have a follow-up question. You know, I hear, you know, I understand cloud communications distinction between facility and equipment as they're proposing. I suppose maybe an alternative way of asking this question is, again, not not necessarily agreeing to, but just to help facilitate a discussion. I was hoping to come here and learn a little bit more about how these networks operate. But if there could be a description of sort of the equipment, the cloud computing and members are characterizing as facilities and equipment, if you could describe perhaps just some of the ways that these different networks have different equipment, are deployed with different equipment. That's directed to the cloud computing folks and perhaps members, but also open to anyone else.
Great, thank you, Leo. And again, just wanting to check if anyone else has any additional input that they wanted to provide to this discussion item before we move to the next topic. If you do, please raise your hand.
Does anybody have any additional information to address Leo's question?
QC, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead and speak.
Sorry, QC.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Great. I just wanted to follow up on a point that Consolidated made, which is that VoIP providers with existing authority shouldn't need any additional certifications. Comcast noted that it derives its authority from its DIVCA franchise. Similarly, Consolidated's VoIP service is provided through its CLEC, Consolidated Communications Enterprise Services, which is it has a facilities-based CPCN already. So we don't believe that anything further would be required.
Great, thank you, QC. And Suzanne, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead and speak.
Sorry, Suzanne, we can't hear you. I think you're still on mute.
It takes a while for the controls for the unmuting to be released to you as you're sitting there in the background. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of echo a point made by Jonathan, about facilities being when you dig in the dirt, right? String aerial facilities, et cetera. And I think that that's helpful. It's a helpful point to make because I think that sort of notion of what is a facilities and what is facilities-based is aligned with CEQA as well, right? Because the California Environmental Quality Act is concerned about when, the ground is being disturbed or you're installing something that has an aesthetic impact, right? Or potentially doing other things along those lines. And so there is a nice alignment, between that idea of facilities and, when CEQA is triggered. So I just wanted to make that linkage. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Jonathan, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and speak.
Thank you again, and a great point. Following up on the earlier point that was made with respect to Consolidated and not requiring additional authority beyond the authorization or license that they have. CCA would take the same position with respect to the current classifications of digital voice nomadic and digital voice fixed, those being the current regulatory classifications of voice over IP services. Because our position is the members that are over the top do not own, control the last mile facilities, there should be no additional supplemental licensing requirement or regulatory attachments associated with those supplemental licensing requirements if they have equipment. Furthermore, again, I'm not a network engineer, so I'm not going to go into any level of detail with respect to the type of equipment that is commonly used in a VoIP network. Things like session border controllers, gateways, servers, routers, basically computer equipment. That all of that equipment is movable, meaning it is not affixed to any particular geographic location. If it's equipment that's currently in the state of California, that equipment can be moved out of the state of California. And so I just wanted to, again, make the point that we have DVN, we have DVF, and the undertaking of a review of facilities for purposes of potentially defining additional licensing and or regulatory requirements attendant to voice over IP services. We believe that there is no need for that supplemental classification and categorization. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. And it looks like we don't have any hand raised. Again, this is just an opportunity if anyone wants to add any additional input to go ahead and please raise your hand. And Leo, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and speak.
Oh, sorry, just 1 minute before. I just wanted to give everyone a time warning. We have 15 minutes left for discussion item 1. Leo, do you have anything to add? Leo, I believe you are still on mute.
Sorry, I just got the prompt to unmute now. Thanks. Yeah, and an interesting point came up earlier. I appreciated the responses. I think party positions are fairly clear. Certainly, hearing them represented here. In terms of going back to I think the nature of this chart. Again, setting aside this distinction about last mile facilities and equipment, it'd be helpful if we did have a perspective about this equipment. We were offered a definition about the movability of these devices, or as being defined as equipment, and also maybe the distinction that folks need to be a network engineer to understand this. So I don't know if there were any network engineers on the call that could maybe describe some of these distinctions and I get that this is a logic map that was charted out, but it'd be helpful to understand if something's co-located, some equipment or facility, whatever you call it, co-located, if it's a server rack that needs to be connected to something else, a little bit more about these network to network interfaces with the PTSN provider. I think that would be helpful part of this discussion to at least understand, and particularly the relationship between all these different VoIP providers for each of these steps in the logic chart. So I guess my question is to the group: is there a network engineer that could maybe help me understand this a little bit better? And two, understanding that this is a logic map, but maybe identify the equipment in this logic map. There's other compliance requirements for interconnected VoIP providers. CALIA, Shake and Stir, E911 requirements, and it'd be helpful to know, are some of those pieces, what allows compliance, if there's monitoring of network quality, monitoring of compliance with the aforementioned FCC requirements, is what quote unquote equipment or facilities are involved in facilitating that. That would be helpful. And I don't want to belabor the point anymore, but I think that would be my last question, at least question to the group for item 1. Thanks.
Thank you, Leo. And Marcus, you have your hand raised. Before we have you speak, Penny, did you have a few additional follow-up questions?
Yes, thank you, Sky. I did actually. Going back to what Jonathan said, I had a follow-up question. So Jonathan, you said that equipment could be moved out of California. When you said that in your earlier comments, did you mean that the service could still be provided in the same manner, irrespective of where the equipment that over-the-top providers use to provide VoIP service? I mean, I'm sorry, irrespective of where the equipment is that over-the-top providers use to provide the VoIP service.
And Jonathan, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and speak.
Yes, sorry about that. The simple answer is yes. It can be moved out of state. It can be moved out of country.
And this service would still function in the same exact way, the same exact manner, right? Like for the end user.
I will not, I'm a lawyer, so I'm trained not to give absolutes. I would say substantially the same, if not exactly the same. I am also a lawyer and not a engineer. And so I would defer a final answer to somebody with more network knowledge. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Mark, I see you have your hand raised.
You can go ahead and speak now, Mark. Thank
All
you.
right, there we go. Hi, this is Mark Iannuzzi. I'll give a little bit of insight into the anatomy of the network, and albeit I'm not a full-blown network engineer, perhaps this perspective is useful for our conversation. My company, Telnet, we operate 2 data center facilities in the United States, one in Detroit and one in Atlanta. In our modern communications world, there are 2 and only 2 public networks in the world. There's the classic PSTN, the public switch telephone network. That network is important to this conversation because this is the province of phone numbers. This is how we use a phone number to make and receive phone calls. And you have to have a relationship to the public network, phone network, PSTN, to procure and assign and otherwise port phone numbers for people to make and receive phone calls over any technology, whether it's VoIP technology or classic TDM technology. That would also be the domain in which being a CLEC would be instructive. It's local exchange carriers who have the controlled phone numbers, and they then issue those out to VoIP providers and businesses and homes and residents. So that's one part of the equation. And next part of the equation, public network, is the public internet. The public internet is the domain of IP addresses. The IP address, once again, like a phone number, their way to know how to send and receive packets of information. So at our data center facilities in Detroit and in Atlanta, we connect to both of those networks. We connect to the public internet and we connect to the PSTN so that phone calls can traverse back and forth. In terms of where the customer resides, regarding to just being able to speak to any of those data centers, as long as what is incumbent upon the customer to enable a VoIP service is 2 things. They have to have access to the internet. They have to have that broadband connection from their home or business over any of the technologies that enable that. So whether it's a DSL line over a copper pair of phone wires, or a cable connection, or a fiber connection, or a wireless cellular network connection, as long as it's broadband capable at their home or business, that's a requisite. And the next requisite they have to have is a device that's capable of, making, like we're talking today, over your laptop. Maybe you have a speaker and you're running an application like WebEx. So in order to make the whole thing work, it's kind of like subscribing to Netflix. Netflix, their servers live somewhere in the world, and who knows where they're at in particular. And you, as a subscriber to Netflix, need to have a broadband connection, and you need to have a TV that's able to support the streaming service for that capability. So it's the same thing for VoIP. is a client of ours that we have the privilege to serve that might be in California, would have to have a broadband network, having the facilities that connect to their premise as described. And they would have to have a computer or phone that is VoIP capable. And once we activate their service and they sign up for that subscription, then using the phone number that's been they've provided or been assigned to them, they're able to make and receive their phone calls. And to the extent it gets into the underneath the covers as to the equipment that lives inside a data center, it's all about security. It's all about delivering the feature functions that the subscriber signed up for. So I was trying to, so I offer that just in terms of the question that was asked earlier about what the nature of the composition is. So our data centers, once again, they could be anywhere we decide we needed to stand them up. We currently support them out of those 2 locations.
Thank you, Mark. And Penny, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much, Mark and everybody.
Sure.
So thank you everyone for providing your responses. This concludes our discussion of item 1. We will now continue to item 2. All right, Francisco, if you can advance the slides to the next one that has item 2 on it. Francisco, can you advance the slides, please? Thank you. On page 2 of its comments submitted on April 28th, 2025, Bond states the facilities involved, if any at all, when nomadic-only interconnected VoIP service providers on-ramp and off-ramp voice traffic to the PSTN turns not on the nomadic or fixed nature of the provider, but on whether the provider has obtained its own numbers directly from NAMPA, owns its own facilities to host phone numbers, and has entered into direct interconnection agreements with other carriers to exchange traffic between networks. Vaughn further states, any provider that hosts its own numbers would likely have facilities somewhere in the United States. Please describe or diagram the types of facilities necessary to host telephone numbers and what instruments or appliances are required for interconnected VoIP service providers to manage numbering resources obtained directly or indirectly from NAMPA. In providing a response, fully elaborate and describe in detail, including specific equipment used. Do these instruments or appliances need to be owned by the interconnected VoIP service provider? Lisa Tano of the Communications Division will now begin calling on participants.
Thank you, Penny. Good morning, everybody. So I would like to open up the roundtable for discussion, and I wanted to see if Glenn Richards, there we go, from Vaughn, if Glenn can maybe add to some of these questions that we had. So let's go ahead and unmute Glenn. There we go. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thanks, Lisa. Just a short response to both A and B. In terms of A, some interconnected VoIP providers that obtain numbers directly from the North American Numbering Plan Administrator host those numbers with another carrier. Some interconnected VoIP providers that obtain numbers directly from the North American Numbering Plan Administrator host those numbers on their own platforms. So to host a phone number, the interconnected VoIP provider would typically need what's called a session border controller, to which a local routing number and an operating company number are pointed. So to place a call to one of these numbers, an originating provider would dip the local number portability database to identify the local routing number. The provider then would route the call either directly to a peered trunk with the recipient interconnected VoIP provider, or if it didn't have a peering arrangement with that provider, to a middle mile provider, which in many cases could be like a CLEC, which would then route the call to the recipient interconnected VoIP provider. In the reverse, outbound calls from an interconnected VoIP provider that hosts its own numbers would either be delivered to a peered trunk, again, if there's a direct arrangement with another interconnected VoIP provider, which would be the terminating carrier, or if it didn't have a peering arrangement, it would be delivered to a middle mile provider, again, like a CLEC, which would then route the call to the public telephone network. That's the response for A. In response to B, interconnected VoIP providers use number inventory management tools to manage numbering resources that they make available to their customers. These are essentially queryable databases, which could be as simple as a spreadsheet or specialized software tools provided by third parties. Some providers may manage numbering resources through tools developed in-house and hosted on redundant servers. So that is kind of a brief response to A and B. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. So I'd like to open up to everybody else, other attendees. If you would like to comment on discussion item number 2, please go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to further add and provide feedback. Okay, just checking. Okay, just okay. Okay. It looks like Suzanne Toller has her hand raised. Can we unmute Suzanne, please? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Suzanne, I've unmuted, requested to unmute. Go ahead and click the mute button.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Lisa. I just wanted to echo what I think Glenn was saying and just reiterate, and maybe it's just this equipment facilities distinction from before we were talking about. But in response to question A, it says you have to describe the kinds of facilities necessary to host telephone numbers. I did want to say, right, that in the old days, right, you had to have your own network to be able to get telephone numbers. But the FCC sort of changed those rules a bit ago. And it's what's called its IPES order, right? And under that order, you have the option to be able to get phone numbers, without your own facilities, but just sort of demonstrating that you have an interconnection agreement with somebody who can deliver calls to the PSTN. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I wanted to see if anybody else on the attendees, if you would like to provide any additional feedback. Okay. Penny, I think that's all the questions we have for this one, for discussion item number 2. So I'm turning this back over.
I do see that Alexandra Green from Turn has her hand raised. Alexandra?
Yes, thank you. This is Alexandra Green from Turn. I had sort of a follow-up question for Glenn from Voice on the Net. So you said that for managing numbers, you'd have most likely some form of software. Is there any physical equipment or facility that goes with that to enable it beyond, I guess, your standard computer architecture?
Well, let's go ahead and unmute Glenn. Okay, there you go. Go ahead, Glenn.
Hi, Alexandra, not to my knowledge.
Okay, great. Thank you, Glenn. And thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you, everyone, for providing your responses. I believe this concludes our discussion of item 2. We will now continue to item 3. Glenn, I do see you you lowered your hand. Okay. So now item 3. Is there any other information concerning facilities that the Commission should be aware of to guide interconnected VoIP service providers to obtain the correct license to operate in California. Kyla Oliveros of the Communications Division will now begin calling on participants.
Thank you, Penny. I see that Glenn Richards has his hand up. I'm not sure if that was from the previous question. If not, you can go ahead and unmute.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I think this may have been addressed earlier. It's the position of VON that nomadic providers must not be subject to licensing. And the question seems to be somewhat of a loaded question by suggesting that the presence of facilities might somehow undermine the distinction that was made between nomadic and fixed in the original order. As the Commission discussed extensively in Phase 1, nomadic VoIP providers don't rely on any physical infrastructure to connect their services to end users. The end users connect to providers via the public internet and can connect anywhere where they have internet access. And that's why the FCC specifically preempted states from regulating nomadic VoIP providers. The existence of other types of media infrastructure doesn't change the FCC's preemptive authority.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn, for that information. I think we're looking at more for this question, information concerning facilities specifically, not the question about the regulation of nomadic VoIP providers, since that was something that was already kind of settled as part of Phase 1 of this proceeding. Now we're looking more just more specifically at the facilities. But thank you again for providing that response. Jonathan, I see you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, just picking up on, again, this is Jonathan Marashlian, sorry for that. Picking up on Glenn's point, as well as the point I tried to make earlier with respect to ensuring that there is a distinction between equipment and facilities, and that facilities is ultimately defined as, again, the type of facility that would potentially necessitate a CEQA review and approval. The point I made earlier was that the equipment that is described in the network diagrams that were, again, submitted as representative examples are not affixed to the physical geography of any particular state. To Glenn's point, as long as there's a broadband connection, the consumer can make a call, and that call can be fielded by, as in the case of Telnet, as Mark Iannuzzi described, the data centers located in Atlanta and Detroit. So should the Commission proceed to define facilities in a manner that goes beyond those types of facilities that are affixed to the physical geography of the state of California, it would run the risk that service providers would migrate their equipment out of state. So I just want to make that point to ensure that there is clarity. The other point that Glenn made is, there is a concern in our reading of the order, the decision from November, that facilities having some facilities, or as the Commission ultimately defines facilities as a VoIP provider, could in fact override the DVN classification. And so we do have a grave concern about how California goes about defining facilities, in the event that doing so, whether it's facilities or limited facilities based, ultimately requires a license as opposed to the DVN registration. So again, I just want to make the point that we do have grave concerns over the extent to which California ultimately defines facilities as it relates to interconnected voice over IP service providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I see that Leo's hand is raised. Please go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Leo with the Utility Reform Network. I suppose I have maybe a follow-up question that gets to the heart of something. One thing that I did just hear raised was there was a discussion that depending on how the state defines facilities versus defines facilities could potentially impact equipment being moved out of the state, which if the definition of the equipment being movable out of the state, or in sort of the one example given, it was actually entirely out of the state. One place my mind goes to is just would love some clarity on is whether as as has been characterized, over top providers do they actually have contracts with facility-based owners, as I think Cloud and folks have been trying to make that distinction, facility owners that give those providers the ability to use those facilities? Are there service level agreements or any other contractual arrangements to provide access? And I know data centers was brought up. I'd be curious to hear about any of those relationships in Michigan and Georgia, as I heard it.
Thank you, Leo. I see that Glenn has his hand raised. Please go ahead and unmute.
There. So briefly in response, and again, we have to be very cautious about being overly broad in statements, because as a number of folks have said already, VoIP provider networks will vary. But the point I was trying to make earlier, and maybe it needs to be clear, and in response to Leo's question, it would be impossible to terminate traffic to the public network or to originate traffic from the network and get that traffic to your customers if you didn't have arrangements with other carriers. Because there is, Leo, not ubiquitous interconnection, or what we refer to as IP interconnection, between the universe of service providers in the US. So if there could be these what are referred to as peering agreements, so that if VoIP provider A had peering agreements with every provider that had a customer in the US, then there would be a direct handoff of that traffic. But because that is not the case in the US, the packets generally have to be converted for purposes of from IP to TDM, and then converted back for termination. So in many instances, VoIP providers will have arrangements with CLECs, who then have termination arrangements with the rest of sort of the world in the US. So these arrangements are critical for the origination and termination of traffic, because we have obviously in the US hundreds, if not thousands, of carriers that originate calls with phone numbers and terminate calls with phone numbers. And because not everyone has an agreement with everyone else, there are generally agreements that allow for the handoff of those calls so that they can reach the intended called party. So I think the answer to your question is yes, there will always have to be these agreements in place. Sometimes they're peering arrangements if the traffic is handed off in IP to IP. But if it's not, then you need these CLECs that are necessary to convert the traffic to TDM so that it can be reconverted and then handed off to the terminating carriers. Hopefully that is helpful to your answer. And again, all of this is generic in nature, because every carrier will have serve different markets, have different use cases. And so that is just sort of a generic response. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Glenn. I don't see any other hands raised. Penny, did you have any follow-up questions? Or actually, there is a hand raised now. Zeb, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi, my name is Zeb Zankel. I represent 3 CLECs that go by Spectrum or Charter under the Charter Communications corporate family. Want to thank the staff for putting on this workshop. Just a few comments that touch on this question and some of the other topics that have been raised. One, just want to reiterate what I understand to be the focus of this workshop, which is to identify when licensing would have to be make a distinction based on the implication of CEQA. And of course, the implication CEQA is implied when there's a potentially significant environmental impact. And I think what we've heard a lot today is that for many of the technological arrangements, for example, there's a software in a computer. It's hard to imagine there could ever be a potentially significant environmental impact for a piece of software that's inside a leased facility. In the past, when we've thought of facilities-based arrangements, we've thought of ground disturbing activity and the like. As Comcast mentioned earlier, Charter, like Comcast, for their VoIP entities, do not own their own facilities. They utilize the facilities of their affiliate cable company, which operates under DivCA, under their video franchise. And there may be certain computer software that the VoIP entity uses, but that would not be software that would have any CEQA impact. Yeah, those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeb. Penny, did you have any follow-up questions?
Sorry, yes. I did have one follow-up question. If there's an outage affecting California customers, who is responsible for fixing the equipment and facilities used to provide the VoIP service? Does anyone, can anyone provide any additional input on that? Yes, Glenn?
The answer to that question, Penny, is it depends. Because these are networks that have multiple providers in the call flows, it depends on where the outage takes place. So that's a impossible question to answer because the outage could be at the end user location where because the broadband is out, the outage could be caused by an electrical outage at the customer's premise, which may prevent the broadband from working. So if it's the electric company could be responsible, the broadband provider could be responsible. If the traffic is handed to a CLEC and that CLEC is experiencing an outage, it could be at that point in the call flow that it needs to be resolved. And I guess in some cases, it could be at the VoIP provider level if that one of their if their equipment may be not functioning. So it really does depend on identifying the cause of the outage. But I would, before it would be then the responsibility of the entity that has caused the outage to fix the outage. Obviously, a nomadic VoIP provider wouldn't be in a position to repair an electrical outage or to fix the broadband network of an end user. So I think that if that was the intention of the question, if it was at the user level, I would think, or it could even be the equipment's not working, their phone's not working, their laptop's not working. So it could be any of those things. And if the outage is at the user level, it would be, at that point where the electrical provider, the broadband provider, would probably be responsible. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So what if the outage is at the provider level and not the user or not the user level? Yeah, I'd like to see you have your hand raised. Sorry, so
Yeah, I didn't have the capability to unmute. It would be obviously if it's at the provider level, that provider would have a responsibility to fix a problem. I mean, that's I think obvious.
sure. So I guess from what you're saying, Glenn, there are kind of three different places. I mean, barring it being on the customer premises and it just being their actual equipment, it would be either the broadband provider, the electrical utility, the CLAC, or potentially the VoIP provider themselves, who would be responsible for identifying and fixing the issue, right?
I mean, there could be others in that ecosystem that I'm not thinking of, but I mean, again, generally, you would think there would be a point of failure. It would be at one of those places, and whoever the point of failure was would arguably have the responsibility to fix the problem.
Sure, great, thank you. Suzanne, I see you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to say, I think it could be broader than that, even potentially more, right? So, I mean, you could have, as we talked about with the cable model, it could be the broadband network that's down, and then it would be the broadband provider who would need to fix it. It could be the customer equipment, as was discussed. That could be the customer's issue to fix. It could be the VoIP provider, the one who's offering the voice service. It could be the interconnecting TDM provider, CLEC, that you have a relationship with whose interconnection circuits are down, right? And so, I mean, I think we're used to an older world where the telephone network and what it looked like was more straightforward and more dedicated to one service. And now you sort of have this broader network where data and voice are intertwined, right? And so you have a lot of different networks and a lot of different providers that are all, that could all have some role in it, right? I mean, it could be the data center. Telnet's data center could be down in the example, right? So, I mean, there could be a lot of different, I guess, points of failure or places where, something is happening within the broader network, which is affecting the service.
Okay, great. Thank you, Suzanne. Let's see. Seems like no one else. Oh, yes, Zeb.
Yeah, hi, this is Zeb Zankel for Charter Communications. To build on what Suzanne said for Comcast, if we're talking about the outside plant facilities experience an outage, for example, a third-party fiber cut, in the case of a cable VoIP network, just to drill down on what Suzanne said, there would typically be the cable company that owns that network that's going to be in charge of repairing that fiber cut. So and I believe that's the primary focus of this discussion, is that more of that outside plant aerial fiber and conduit that we're talking about today. So if that's what you're talking about, it would not, it wouldn't be the VoIP provider, it would be the network owner that's going to fix that type of damage to restore service.
Great, thank you, Zeb. Leo, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up with maybe a more narrowing question. Understanding that there are several layers to sort of to sort of pick apart and understand any particular outage. But I guess my thoughts immediately go to, I think I believe Glenn, and forgive me if I'm misremembering, but Glenn had mentioned, this that it could be at the user premise and all that. I understand that, but I did hear a reference to something. Something that could happen with the VoIP provider's equipment in particular, assuming the provider has that equipment. Would love to know sort of maybe what kind of what could be happening to that equipment that leads to outages. I think also heard a mention of something could happen at the data center, which is a pretty broad broad statement. But I'm wondering if there's a misconfigured router, a SIP trunk, network to network interface. What are sort of the things that with a VoIP provider that could go wrong, that could cause an outage. The other thing that I'm also curious about is I know interconnected VoIP providers have to report their outages to the FCC. I'd be curious how that is monitored and reported to mostly the monitoring piece. How do you know at what point a call has failed? Whether it's at ISP or with the terminating or originating ISP or through a VoIP provider, their data center, their equipment in quotes or facilities, or I even heard infrastructure mentioned earlier. So in any of those terms, at what point could an outage occur?
Thank you, Leah. Glenn, you can go ahead and unmute.
So since we haven't heard this enough, I'm a lawyer, not a network engineer, Leo. But in terms of I'm going to try to answer a couple of your questions with respect to the FCC's network outage reporting. That is based on certain user minute thresholds that would have to be met in order for that to be a reportable incident within the network outage reporting system. I want to say that it's like 900,000 user minutes, and it's a formula that you use based on the number of customers that are affected by an outage and whether an outage, it could be local in nature, regional in nature, more broadly. To the extent that you're asking about how that would happen, I mean, I don't have specific instances. I have been representing VoIP providers for decades and am not aware of a single network outage that actually raised to the threshold of, at least with my clients, that ever actually raised to the threshold of a reportable incident. It's my understanding that the types of things that have caused outages, in cases where the FCC has issued decisions. I mean, it could be something as simple as during a software update. I mean, these are computer networks. Software updates or glitches or things that aren't tested properly can cause large outages. So I'm not really sure I can answer your question specifically. I think too, in certain cases, VoIP providers rely in many cases on third parties, for example, to provide access and connectivity to 911. Most VoIP providers, to my knowledge, don't have interconnection directly into the 911 network, to the extent that they're 911 service providers. have a failure, that also could rise potentially to a reportable incident with the FCC. So I'm not sure I'm specifically answering your question, but these are computer networks. And if you don't do an update, or if the update goes awry, presumably that could cause connectivity issues. It could be at the CLEC level. And I'm not exactly sure I'm in a position to answer how the VoIP provider, though, becomes aware of that. They have other, presumably customers can email or text if they can't call their service providers to say, I don't have connectivity. But you probably need someone a bit more in the weeds on the technical side to give you a more fulsome answer to your question.
Thank you, Glenn. Leo, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute.
There we go. I guess WebEx had heard enough from me. So no, Glenn, thank you so much for your attempt to answer. I think this does underscore, there's some really smart, talented folks in the room. It'd be great if we had some network engineers as part of this conversation. Certainly something we can, discuss moving forward as well. And an interesting point that you raised is like a perfect segue into one of the other questions I had was about, connecting with PSAPs, the 911 component. From what I heard, and this is not just for you, Glenn. I don't want to pick on you. Just open discussion item would be, to what extent are sort of, I think there was a reference to third parties. It sounds like for VoIP providers, most of the 911 interconnection is handled by third parties. I'm wondering if anyone here is anyone present is a third party, and if there would be any value in talking with those folks as well. At the end of the day, the folks that provide the service are the ones registering the state. It's not clear to me if these third parties are required to register. So yeah, if I could get a little bit more third party, and this isn't just limited to 911, interconnection with 911 services. It does sound like there's some flexibility. In fact, some of the other cable providers have talked about leasing facilities as well. But in terms of facilities, quote unquote, equipment, whatever that distinction means to you, it would be helpful to understand, the role of third parties in providing some of these important, elements of provisioning VoIP, interconnected VoIP service.
Thank you, Leo. Does anyone have any response to what Leo said? Zeb, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute. Zeb, if you're talking, not sure if you pressed unmute, or Francisco, if there's any technical issues, please let us know. Oh, there you go.
It's Zeb Zankel. I just wanted to answer Leo's question. My client, Charter Communications, is not a 911 service provider, but I think just generally aware that as part of the Cal OES contract for 911 service providers, there is an obligation to get a CPCN, and there was a flurry of CPCN certifications for the 911 service providers a few years ago. My understanding, there's several, the kind of core 911 service providers in the state all have CPCNs. I think that's unique to California. It's generally not the case in other states, but it is in California.
Thank you, Zeb. Suzanne, please go ahead and unmute.
I just wanted to provide a little bit more context, at least for an IP provider like Comcast, who transmits all of their traffic in IP, right? California's 911 network, as I understand it, is all TDM based today. So in order to be able to get IP phone calls to 911, you need an intermediary, right? Who's going to do that conversion for you. So just in case that helps with the discussion, it's a little bit of this is sort of a function of the way that the 911 network is set up. That might be changing in the future, but that's my understanding about how it is today.
Thank you, Suzanne. At this time, there are no additional hands raised. I'll pause for a moment for any final thoughts. And if not, we'll go ahead and return the floor to Penny.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, I do not see any other hands raised. Thank you everyone for providing your responses. This concludes our discussion of item 3. However, we do have some time left. And I did actually want to go back to the other 2 questions. I have a couple of follow-up questions to some of the earlier responses. Going back first to item 2, we would still like to know some more about interconnected VoIP service providers that host their own NAMPA numbers. Specifically, what equipment is required? Is there a geographical location where that equipment must be located, or is it located in a data center outside of California? So I'm not sure if Vaughn had any additional information about that, or anybody else. Oh yes, Glenn, I see you have your hand raised.
Penny, I don't really have an answer to that question, and I think it would probably be service provider specific. So I'm not in a position to provide an answer. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Glenn. That was helpful. Does anybody else have any input that they can provide to that question? I don't see anybody else's hand raised. So I guess not. I just wanted to ask one additional follow-up question as well. Sorry, one moment. I believe I had heard that one of the prior responses had said that nomadic VoIP providers have no facilities. I'm not sure, I don't recall, I'm sorry, unfortunately, if that was Vaughn or CCA that had said that. I just wanted to kind of go back to that and ask others to comment on whether they agree with that statement, whether that's also kind of been their understanding. I don't see any hand raised. So yes, Zeb?
Yeah, hi Penny. This is Zeb Zankel for Charter Communications and their VoIP entities. Not to the question you just asked, but to the prior question about facilities for numbering. At least for Charter, there is a process in which there's a third party which the Charter can checks with for numbering, and so I don't know the exact technology, but I think that is, at least for some providers, their setup.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, Zeb. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add to our previous discussions of items 1 or 2 or even 3? No, let's see. Yes, QC.
Hi, this is QC for Consolidated. We just wanted to clarify that Consolidated gets its telephone numbers through its CLEC authority. So we use our CLEC authority and we obtain numbers from the numbering administrator and we give those numbers to our VoIP operation.
Great, thank you for making that clarification, QC. Let's see. I don't see anybody else with their hand raised. Let's see. Does anybody else have any additional anything else that they would like to add to our discussion of our 3 discussion topics of today? No, I don't see anything. Oh yes, Suzanne.
Penny, I actually have a procedural question, but I don't know if you're maybe going to get to that. I don't mean to preempt you on that.
Sure. What is your procedural question, Suzanne?
I think at the beginning you said that there was going to be some follow-up questions after the workshop that parties could get to comment on. And the procedural schedule that was in the scoping ruling talked about there being a workshop report and comments on a workshop report. I just wanted to see if maybe, given the format of this workshop, if instead of there being a workshop report, now we were just kind of looking at these follow-up questions and a written opportunity, if that was taking the place of the workshop report.
Sure. So given that this has been kind of a round table and it has been recorded, I'm unsure about a workshop report since we do have that recording now. Yeah, so I do not believe that there is going to be a workshop report, but one second, let me actually confirm that. So while I'm confirming that, QC, I saw that you had your hand raised.
Yes, we also had a procedural question. We were wondering whether it was possible for you to send a copy of the PowerPoint that you used during today's workshop to the service list.
So we I think we can I'll check internally, but I think we can go ahead and post this PowerPoint online on our website. And it will be on the section of the website, the Communications Division website that has information about this proceeding. And we can, that's where also we will be posting the recording of this workshop. And we'll definitely make sure to send a link to both of those items to people, whether it be in the ALJ ruling seeking comments on the workshop or in another format. Oh yes, yes. ALJ Watsaga, I see you have your hand raised. Sorry, ALJ Watsaga, we are unable to hear you. I believe you might still be on mute. Oh, there you are.
Okay, hi, this is ALJ Camille Watsaga, and in response to Suzanne Toller, yes, we are replacing the workshop report with the post-workshop questions, and during that time, when parties respond, they can refer to this workshop, and they can also refer to the recording and places in the recording. In their comments, if they wanted to expand or move into the record anything that was discussed today, will come in through party comments.
Great, thank you, ALJ Watsaga. Does anyone else have any other additional questions? So just to reiterate, we will be posting the recording of this our website, as well as this PowerPoint. It'll be on the commission's website. So let's see, unless there are any other questions, I don't see anybody with their hands raised. I'm not sure if anyone had any follow-up questions to what ALJ Watsaga shared or anything else. No, doesn't seem like it. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today, everyone. Our workshop has now concluded, and a recording of the workshop will be posted on CPU's website when available. So, I think, sorry, Robert, did you want, or Francisco, did you want to move to our last slide? So before we conclude, this is the link here where you may visit to get more information about our rulemaking, including a copy of the presentation and the and the recording of this workshop. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye, and have a nice day, everyone. Thanks. This concludes our workshop.